Hi, I'm Kevin Richardson, and today I want to talk a little bit about failure. Now, when people see a bodybuilder like myself, natural bodybuilder like myself, what they tend to look at is the results. And what tends to grab your attention is the results. You look at the biceps, you look at the muscles, you look at the vascularity, you look at the definition. What you don't see, however, is the failures. And I think that it's the failures in a lot of ways that help define many of us as bodybuilders, and those of us who dedicate our lives to the pursuit of some degree of excellence when it comes to physicality. And it's something that we don't really talk about often enough, and I think we need to talk about it a little bit more. For me, failure began with my very first bodybuilding competition. It was the teenage Mr. Trinidad and Tobago. It was back in, not sure exactly what year, but it was quite a long time ago. I was a teenager. And I was 17 years old, and I had done everything possible to prepare for this competition. I really put every iota of energy. I trained as hard as I could. My dad was 100% on everything, my posing. I posed 2-3 hours a day before the competition, and the day of the show I completely froze. Before going on stage, I looked out and I saw the audience. I saw the fact that I was dripping in oil and that I was wearing some red posing trunks, which I'd never really done before in public, and I said to myself, there's absolutely no way I'm going to go up on stage and do any of this. And I was about to walk away before my coach saw me, and he said that I had no choice. I'd come this far, have to do it. And he physically picked me up and pushed me on the stage. So as much as people may see the more confident version of myself right now, the reality is my entire natural bodybuilding career started with me being pushed on stage because I was far too terrified to go up there. And Rodney, wherever you are, thanks so much for pushing me because it was really important. I needed that push. But what came afterwards was even more seminal in terms of forming me as a person and someone who made this a lifestyle. Out of that competition, there were 12 of us, 12 teams. It was very, very tough competition. And I remember back at that time, only the top 5 competitors were allowed to pose in the night show. So in bodybuilding competitions, back in those days, you had the pre-judging in the morning, where they'd actually judge the bodybuilding competition. And then you had the night show at night, which was pretty much the posing and the awards. So in the pre-judging, they pretty much pick out who the top 5 competitors are going to be, and they go on to the night show. Now, where I come from, they don't exactly tell you that you didn't make it until the very last minute. So we were all backstage, we were all getting ready, we were all preparing to go on stage, and all of our friends and family members were in the audience waiting to see us. And we got the numbers. I never forgot, I think my number was number 55. And they called every number, as far as I was concerned, except 55. So I went to the expediter backstage and I said, "You didn't call number 55. And he looked at me and said, "No, I didn't. Good luck next year, kid." And I realized right there and then that I didn't make it. I wasn't going to pose that night. And I had to walk outside knowing that my family, my friends were all there, waiting to see me for the night show. They had purchased tickets just to come to see me compete. And I had to go tell them that I didn't make it. I didn't make the final cut. It was heart-wrenching. It was really, really, really heart-wrenching. I was in such a high, the idea that I was going to compete. And the reality of actually being on stage was just so terrifying. And then finally coming pretty much dead last in the competition, because I did ask the judges later on what my placing was, and they said, well, you were 12 out of 12. And I think at that point there was a defining moment. There was that point where am I going to give up bodybuilding and just say, you know, there's no way a skinny kid without using drugs can go ahead and build a pretty impressive physique enough to be competitive as a bodybuilder? Or was I going to keep on going ahead? And I think that the loss was important for me in terms of I realized where I was at the time. There was no way that I could really see myself getting to where I wanted to be in the foreseeable future. It was going to take some years, like really years. And I need to focus more on doing the work, training hard, training smart, doing things differently, and really mastering the craft of taking care of myself, but the idea of it being a long-term investment. This wasn't going to be something where I invest some time and I can immediately see results. It was going to be something where I knew it was going to have to take a lot longer than I thought it would. Now, initially I thought, when I first started training, that by my late teens I'd be competing, I'd be winning competitions, I'd be up there. And that wasn't the case. My first competition, I probably weighed in about 175, 180 pounds. I've been 6 feet tall since I was 14 years old, so that's not that impressive on a bodybuilding stage, much less on a bodybuilding stage against competitors who were not drug tested, because when I first started competing, drug tested competitions really weren't available to me. It was only until I came to the US that I was able to compete in competitions where everyone was drug tested and it was more of a level playing field for competitors like me who are lifetime naturals. That being said, the next couple of years I did some more competitions. I did end up placing. I remember I placed 5th in one competition, which was quite an accomplishment for someone 19 years old, teenager, and I was competing against, you know, the very guys who I looked up to when I was a kid. And there I was standing, you know, side to side alongside them. But I did realize that even though I seemed to be doing better, it was going to be a really long time before I could get to where I wanted to be. And that was the other thing, in that because the competitors at that time were not drug tested, they had a look that I could never achieve. And I had to focus a little bit more on figuring out what I wanted to achieve. Now, as a kid who was in love with comic books, the ideal body for me was more that of the comic book characters, that, you know, really muscular physique. But that really muscular physique in the comic books was fiction. It wasn't really real. I had to find what really mattered to me. And that evening, that night, when I lost that competition, the next day I went to the gym. And going to the gym the very next day was important. It was a Sunday. Usually I didn't really go to the gym on Sundays, but I had to go in that day because I had to start that real journey, start doing the real work of realizing that I couldn't look for some kind of reward. I couldn't look for a trophy. I couldn't look for being a champion bodybuilder as my goal. That couldn't be something that I could realistically focus on. I had to focus on training. I had to focus on training harder than I ever did. I had to focus on training smarter than I ever did. I've always trained 3 times a week based on the idea that as a natural athlete, I'm only going to grow when I'm resting. So I need to rest more than I'm training. And as far as diet is concerned, my diet couldn't be something I arbitrarily came on and off of. It had to become a lifestyle. It had to be something I truly dedicated myself to. And in losing, it helped me understand the fact that what was really important wasn't really the winning. It wasn't really the accomplishment. It was the journey towards it. And I learned to love that journey. I learned to love training, to love eating properly. I love feeling in a body where I was getting somewhere, where I was, you know, seeing progress day by day by day by day. And what was important for me was progress, not so much result. So by the time I started competing again, I'd been off from competing for about 5 years. I hadn't competed in 5 years. and I had pretty much retired from bodybuilding at the age of 24, because I didn't know, number one, that natural competitions existed, and also I was so focused on the training and eating properly and following this path that competition didn't really seem to be as important to me anymore. And it was precisely at that point when I was asked to start back competing that I started doing really, really well. And of course, the rest is a little bit of history. But the bottom line is that failure, that getting to that place where totally rejected by the bodybuilding judges who I was trying so hard to impress, and also going up against people who, looking back, in fact, some of them were actually on drugs, it was impossible for me to ever beat them. And that's the point, that winning isn't really the important thing. What was really important was me losing, was me failing, was me being so terrified that I couldn't go on stage, was me realizing that it was going to take me many more years to get where I wanted to be, and that where I wanted to be maybe wasn't going to be big enough to be a Mr. Olympia competitor or a Mr. USA competitor, that big enough for me just had to be better than I was the month before, the year before, and that had to be good enough. The reward was that I got to be me, and I got to be better every single time. And I look back at those failures, and I look at, the many people who have had the honor and privilege of training for competitions as well, and I think it also helped me understand what it's like to go through that struggle. A lot of competitors, a lot of bodybuilders, a lot of fitness personalities are genetically fantastic looking from day one. I was not one of them. I really took a long time before I got to a place where I was where I wanted to be. But in order to do that, I had to fail. But the failure of not being able to go on stage was what pushed me towards doing everything possible to learn about public speaking, to learn how to present in front of a camera, to learn how to go even so far as doing stand-up comedy, because I wanted to be able to go on stage and no longer be afraid. The failing, coming last in that show, put me back in the gym the next day, and also put me on a path where training and eating and living a lifestyle based on improvement rather than trying to get to a particular place or reward or goal became really the center, and still has been all these years later, decades later. And I think that's what's really, really important. The fact is that yes, we do fail, but it's what we do with those failures. Now, most people aren't trying to become champion bodybuilders, let's just face it. Most people are trying to lose weight. And most people who try to lose weight fail miserably. You get to that point where you feel absolutely frustrated. You get to that point where you've done everything and the weight's going back up. You try to eat properly and you slip on your diet and you keep on slipping and slipping and slipping. You feel disgusted with yourself. Same with those who are following a bodybuilding path. If you're not naturally gifted in bodybuilding, you go to the gym, you work so hard, yet you look in the mirror and you're not really seeing that you've got anywhere and you feel like a complete failure. You have to embrace those times. Those times are lessons. It's what defines you. It's a moment that allows you to see where you are and retrain your focus on trying to get to that reward. Instead, focus on doing the work. Focus on eating properly. Focus on training consistently. Focus on the idea of what you're going to get. It's going to take years and years. And pick yourself up and just keep on going. The most important thing that I did after Rodney, my coach at the time, pushed me on stage, the next day was going back to the gym. If you've fallen off your diet, if you've been training for a long time, if you're not getting anywhere, if you feel that your fitness goals or something are too far-fetched to even believe, stop thinking about it. Focus on the work. Do what needs to be done. And let time do the rest. That's probably the best and greatest secret, if we call it a secret in the first place, that anyone who's achieved anything on a physical level can pass on. You're going to fail. You're going to have days when you feel absolutely like a failure. But if you're not focused on winning, if you're not focused on losing the weight, losing the body fat, winning the competition, following the diet, training properly, eating properly is what you're focused on, you never fail. And if you do fail, it's just one more lesson that you learn about what not to do to get to where you want to get to. Again, if you failed, get back up, keep on going, and know as well that so many of us not only have done the same, but are also looking at your example and want to see you get up when you fail, because we want to see the beautiful work that you're going to create in time as well. I'm Kevin Richardson. Thanks for tuning in, and Excelsior.